Hello, everybody. I'm Blaize. I'm an alcoholic. And in case you're wondering, that's my real name. There's a story behind it, but I'll save that for later. Anyway, glad to be sober, glad to be here. I'm not happy about being this old, but I can tell you that sometimes I forget how old I am. I still think I'm 20. And I have to watch out for that, especially if I'm flirting with the barista. And I think she thinks I'm young and handsome, and I'm not, But there's some things. I've talked to some people that were young in the program. Actually, I'd like to reenact something for you briefly. There's a gal I knew. She was about 21, and she was recommending another meeting to another alcoholic. And so she was describing it, and okay, I want you to be me and I'm going to be her. Okay. So she's saying, yeah, it's a great meeting and there's some older people in there. I mean, crazy old. Sorry. So, but here I am. There's a couple things I just, and as far as my age is concerned, there's another phenomenon about me, and that my alcoholism was what I would call adult onset. I was about 38, and it hit me hard and it hit me fast. And I tell you what I can relate to you is that by the time I got to 30, I was pretty sure that I used to say, well, I'm not an addictive personality. And if there were beers in the fridge, I could take them or leave them. I could even do the occasional line here and there. And I was a party boy. I didn't have any purpose or direction in my life. Went to a few CODA meetings, I can tell you that. It's the first 12-step program I went to. But yeah, by that point, I just couldn't imagine I'd ever get addicted to anything. I knew it was possible. I knew people who were addicts around me. But I tell you what, it finally caught up to me. And when it hit me hard. Cocaine brought me to my knees, but make no mistake, I'm an alcoholic. It's the first thing I did. It's what I did all the way through everything, and it was the last thing I did. I'm definitely qualified for this program. I was just, from the time I knew that there was no future in my drinking to the time I got sober was 2.5 years. So what was the holdup? I'd already been to AA meetings. So I knew, let me fix something over here. Sorry. I knew that I'd been to AA meetings. I knew it existed. I had a friend of mine that was in Alcoholics Anonymous, and she went in 6 years before I did. So, and I liked everything I saw whenever I went to meetings. There were people there that, they looked good, they smelled good, they paid their taxes. They dressed well. They had everything I wanted. The one thing I didn't want was the part about not drinking, but I wanted everything else. And but I kept an open mind. I'll give myself that. My friend Mary, she never gave up on me. There were times when I'd be between party evenings or whatever you want to call them, or sitting around at home drinking alone, and I got tired of that. She goes, well, why don't you come with me to a meeting? And then she'd take me to what's called to a meeting in Los Angeles that's called the Studio Group. And it's been meeting continuously since 1941. Speaking of age. And I would go on Fridays, and it was a speaker meeting. It's a longer meeting than what I run into in these parts. And about an hour and a half, there's 15 minutes break. So there's a short speaker, long speaker. And I heard some great stuff, some things that were very entertaining. I remember this, one guy talked about stealing a baby alligator from a zoo during a blackout. I thought that was interesting. Another guy who he was at a bar, and he had this technique for finding his car, where he'd hire a cab in Beverly Hills. He'd hire a cab to drive him around until he found the car. And then one night he couldn't find the car, and he reported it stolen, and the cops found the car. It was parked in his garage. So he had driven it home and forgot all about it. So I loved listening to that stuff. It was very entertaining. So I didn't have any hang up with AA. My father had told me about Alcoholics Anonymous when I was a boy, and he had great admiration for it too. But I tell you what, my last weekend, it's a bad scene, man. And it was bad. It was bad. And I'd stack it up against anybody else's. There's, a lot of times people like to brag about how they drank more than you spilled and all that sort of thing. But I can tell you my last weekend was bad. And I won't go into the details tonight, because it's kind of like, I don't know, suffering porn or something like that. But, the thing that was important is that when I came in here, the reason it was not hard for me to stay sober is not because it was easy. It was because I absolutely, honestly had run out of options, including drinking and using. I'd gotten to the point a week earlier where I'd just gotten up out of a dead sleep and grabbed a bottle of vodka and just poured it right down the sink. And I'll tell you what I will tell you about the last weekend is that there was one point after drinking and doing drugs and excuse me, but looking at porn, which is my only girlfriend anymore. And after that whole thing, just, really feeling like I wanted to die, like never before. I don't know if you've ever joked about it and said, oh boy, I wish I could kill myself. I've never felt it before, but I felt it then that night. And then I did the only thing I knew what to do, which is that I drank and passed out. And then I woke up and I felt it again. And I would never have wished that on anybody, not once, let alone twice. So I called my friend Mary, and finally, again, what was the holdup? Why is it that any of us can know that we are done and still not stop? Why is it that I could be in front of my toilet in doing the dry heaves and praying, please, make it stop, and yet start and drink the next day? Why is that? Why, if I could bottle that, and sell that, I could make a lot of money. I don't have the answer for myself or for any of you. I wish I did. My friend Mary used to say, you don't have to take the elevator all the way to the bottom floor. You can get off in any floor. But I still didn't know how to do that. I mean, really, what does that mean? Why was one weekend worse than the other? But anyway, I had the bad weekend. So when I came in, I was a mess. I couldn't go to my first meeting for the first 4 days because I couldn't focus. My eyes were jittering. I could barely stand to be in public, but I stayed at home by myself and stayed sober. And I went in and finally went to my first meeting on Thursday. And on Friday, I went in and my same friend, Mary, I don't see her anymore much, but she asked me to read, just like, some of you were doing tonight. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't. I had the shakes. I just couldn't imagine getting up in front of a bunch of people and a microphone, and I can't do it. It's probably one of the few times I've ever turned down an AA request. I said, I can't do it. But what can I tell you? I kept an open mind, and I didn't, when I came in and I saw God all over the wall, I was just like, well, this isn't going to work. There's no way. And that was 28 years ago. No, this isn't going to work. So, and finally I got it. When they would say you could pick as a higher power, like the higher power thing, obviously is what I was having trouble with. And if the old clock in the wall is serving me, what do I got, about 3 minutes reality check, or a little more maybe?
You got about 10 minutes if you want to take it, Blaize.
So I Yeah, I didn't know what I was going to do with the God thing, and some people come in with one. I actually one time heard somebody say that his higher power was his Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and it's like, okay, cool. And there was something in another city, and I was talking to a guy who lived there, and he said that there was this whole thing about people saying that AA was somehow a Christian program. And I said, man, I don't know where they get that from. I mean, there's, Catholics and Protestants and Jews are all mentioned in the book. I got a friend of mine that's a Buddhist, that's as sober as anybody. And I also know a couple of people who are atheists. One guy said he's more of an atheist now than when he joined the program. But, and I don't know how those guys do it, frankly. But I'll tell you how I finally got it, because people used to say, oh, you can, if you can pick the group as your higher power, that works to a point. But when I'm praying, who am I praying to? Unless I got one of you guys on the phone, it's just like, So, but I did figure it out, and it finally occurred to me, I don't have to define it. Why do I have to define it? Why do I have to tell you or me? And by that definition, I guess that would make me an agnostic, because I had this problem. I didn't really see how rationally there could be anything like a supreme being. But I had this problem, and that is that I had this empty spot in my head that craved a supreme being. So whether there was a God or not, if there wasn't a God, I'd have to make one. And that's what I did. And I refused to define it. I know there's some people that know where he lives, that he's a he, the idea that God has a gender. How does he dress? What, where does, what's his zip code? All that. Why do I have to say any of that? I don't. And I don't have to define it to me. The fact that I don't know about it is fine. And it fits a definition that I understand of being an agnostic, which is that the concept of God is unknown and unknowable. And but that's what I've picked. Don't listen to me. What do I know? So that luckily that got me going. That got me started, and I got a sponsor pretty early on. And if y'all don't have one, please get one. Just a funny thing, sponsorship is not in the book. It's not in the first 164 pages. But there is something that's called a closed mouth understanding friend. And in those days, they just didn't have the terminology, but they figured it out. And it seems to me like the best way to do the steps. If you can take direction, if you find someone who has what you want. And sometimes that changes over time. But if you find someone who has the kind of program that you want, I mean, sometimes it's tempting to look at someone and says, yeah, he's got a 12-cylinder Jaguar. I'd like that. But if you find somebody who has a program that looks solid, and who knows, you look at somebody's outsides and they look okay, but God knows what's on the inside. But, and you're not getting married. Just pick somebody, and start working with them. And if it doesn't work out, then move on, But the thing I want to discourage is don't change sponsors, as often as hopefully as you change your underwear. It's like you're looking for a consensus, I mean, hopefully there's someone you'll land on and you'll work with, like I have with my sponsor for 22 years. And yeah. And he's scaring me a little bit because he's older than I am, and he is not in good shape. And I'm looking, leave it to a selfish alcoholic, never mind what he's going through. I mean, I worry about it, but that son of a bitch is not going to live forever. And I do not know what I'm going to do if I have to pick another sponsor. But to give you an idea, your sponsor doesn't have to be older than you. He certainly doesn't, he or she or whatever, doesn't have to be smarter than you. But what's important is that you've got another person that even philosophically is somehow holding you accountable. You have someone to read your fifth step for. And the thing too, and the thing that I have to be really careful with is that I have to make sure that I am not a counselor as a sponsor. I am not here to tell you how to run your life or anybody else. I'm not here to give you psychological counseling. I'm not qualified for it, at least not yet. I've gone back to college to be a social worker, but thank you. But that's not what I understand a sponsor to be. There's a spiritual experience, and I've had people call me to read their what is now a 10th step, and in my opinion, I'm about ready to wrap it up here. In my opinion, 10 and 11 is 1 through 9 done in compressed form pretty much every day. And if you get used to having that as your foundation, then you can do 12. I'm jumping around here a little bit, but then you can do 12. And if you're not doing 12, now you may be too new in your opinion to do it, but if at some point somebody asks you to sponsor them, in my opinion, we're really not in a position to make a decision to say yes or no. I mean, there would have to be extremely extenuating circumstances. If somebody comes up to you and says, would you be my sponsor? I have to say yes. I have to. It's a gift that's been given to me, and it's how I'll stay sober the rest of my life, one day at a time. But 10 and 11, and I'll finish with this, the way I understand it, 1 through 9 done in compressed form every day. And I've got some people that call me with some frequency, which I'm very happy about. And they read their 10th step, their resentments and their fears behind the resentments and the fears that stand alone. And just doing that, whether I tell them, share anything with you or not, that's enough. That's enough. Spiritual experience does not have to be explained. And the one thing that I try to say at the end of every phone call and at the end of the share is thank you. Thank you for helping me with my 12th step, because it's thank God for my sponsees. I mean, when everything else failed, there was someone there who picked up the phone and who proves that they're more screwed up than I am. So anyway, that's all I got to say. And thanks for letting me share.